I found my husband's secret bank account and discovered he was hiding money for his new family. Hi everyone. Before we get into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel's reach has been dropping a bit, and one of the best ways you can support us is by subscribing. It's quick, free, and helps us keep bringing you new and interesting stories. Your support means the world to us, and together we can grow this channel. Thank you so much. Now let's get to today's story. I'm writing from a temporary account for obvious reasons, and I've changed some details to protect my anonymity. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday. I remember that detail because Tuesdays were my favorite day of the week. Michael worked late on Tuesdays, which meant I had the house to myself after the kids went to bed. I'd make a cup of tea, curl up on the couch with a book, and enjoy the silence that only mothers of teenagers truly appreciate. But that Tuesday, the silence would be broken by something I never saw coming. We'd been married for 19 years. 19 years of mortgages and minivans, parent-teacher conferences and family vacations, arguments about whose turn it was to take out the trash, and quiet reconciliations in the dark. It wasn't perfect, what marriage is, but it was ours. Solid. Predictable. Safe. Or so I thought. I'd picked up the mail on my way in from grocery shopping, arms loaded with bags, mentally planning dinner while simultaneously remembering I needed to sign Jake's permission slip for the field trip and check if Emma had finished her history project. The mail got tossed on the kitchen counter with everything else, forgotten in the chaos of putting away food and starting the laundry. It wasn't until later that evening, after the kids had retreated to their rooms and I was wiping down the counters, that I noticed it. A white envelope, official-looking, addressed to Michael, from a bank I didn't recognize. Sterling Trust Financial. I'd never heard of it. I held it up to the light without thinking, an old habit from childhood when my sister and I would try to peek at birthday cards before opening them. I couldn't see much, just the shadow of text. But something about it felt off. We banked at First National. We had for years. Our checking account, our savings, the college funds for both kids. Everything was at First National, so why was Michael getting mail from Sterling Trust? I set it aside with his other mail, a couple of bills, some junk, and tried to forget about it. It was probably nothing. Maybe a promotional offer, maybe something related to work. Michael was an accountant, after all. He dealt with financial institutions all the time. But that night, as I lay in bed listening to him breathe beside me, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The envelope felt like a small tear in the fabric of normalcy, barely noticeable but impossible to ignore once you'd seen it. The next morning, I watched him sort through his mail at the breakfast table, while Emma complained about her English teacher, and Jake scrolled through his phone in violation of our no phones at breakfast rule. Michael picked up the envelope from Sterling Trust, and I saw something flicker across his face. Not quite surprise, but something close to it. Concern, maybe. He slipped it into his briefcase without opening it, then finished his coffee in 3 quick gulps. "I have to run," he said, kissing the top of my head in that distracted way he'd developed over the years. "Early meeting." "You didn't open your mail," I said, keeping my voice casual. "I'll look at it later. It's probably nothing." Nothing. That word again. He left, and I cleared the breakfast dishes, while the kids argued about whose turn it was to sit in the front seat. After I dropped them at school, I came home to the silent house and found myself standing in front of Michael's home office. He never locked it. There'd never been a reason to. We shared everything, finances, decisions, our lives. I did the bills every month, knew our account numbers by heart, could tell you exactly how much we had in savings and how much we still owed on the mortgage. Or at least I thought I could. I pushed open the door and stood there for a moment, feeling like an intruder in my own home. The desk was neat, organized in that meticulous way Michael organized everything. Bills in one stack, work papers in another, personal items in the drawer. I shouldn't have looked. I knew I shouldn't have looked. But my hands moved anyway, opening the briefcase he'd left on the desk chair, finding the white envelope from Sterling Trust. Inside was a statement, a bank statement for an account in Michael's name. Just his name, Not our names together, the way our other accounts were set up. The balance made my vision blur. 847,293.67. $847,000. I read it 3 times, convinced I was misreading it. But the numbers didn't change. Account holder, Michael Thompson. Balance, 847,293.167. My hands started shaking so badly, I nearly dropped the paper. I sat down heavily in his desk chair, the statement spread out on the desk in front of me, like evidence at a crime scene. Where had this money come from? We didn't have this kind of money. We lived comfortably, sure, but we weren't wealthy. We drove sensible cars and took 1 vacation a year and worried about college tuition like every other middle-class family in America. I scanned the transactions, trying to make sense of them. Regular deposits, all around the same amount. Withdrawals, too, but not to places I recognized. No grocery stores or gas stations or utility companies. These were transfers. To another account. To someone named L. Morrison. L. Morrison. I didn't know any L. Morrison. The statement covered 3 months of activity. I found older statements in the desk drawer, buried under tax documents. 6 months of history, a year, 2 years. This account had existed for at least 2 years, and I'd never known about it. The deposits were consistent, every 2 weeks. The same amount each time, transferred from his work account. Money that should have been coming to our joint account, being used for our family, our life, our future. Instead, it was going here, and then to L. Morrison. I took photos of everything with my phone, my hands still shaking, my mind racing through possibilities. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe he was hiding money for a surprise trip, a gift, something he was planning. Maybe L. Morrison was a financial advisor or a business partner. But even as I tried to rationalize it, I knew. Deep down, in that place where women's intuition lives, I knew. I put everything back exactly as I'd found it and left his office. In the kitchen, I made myself a cup of coffee I didn't drink. I sat at the table and stared at the wall and tried to remember how to breathe. 19 years, 2 kids, a house, a life. Had it all been a lie? I thought about the past few months, looking for signs I'd missed. Michael had been working late more often. He'd been distracted, distant. Sex had become rare, perfunctory. I'd chalked it up to stress, to middle age, to the natural cooling that happens in long marriages. But what if it wasn't that at all? What if he was with her? With L. Morrison? I pulled out my phone and looked at the photos I'd taken. The statements, the transactions, the evidence of a secret life I'd known nothing about. I should confront him. I should ask him directly. But something stopped me. Maybe it was fear of what he'd say. Maybe it was the sick certainty that once I asked, once I knew for sure, I couldn't unknow it. Our life as I understood it would be over. So instead, I did what I'd always done when faced with a problem I didn't know how to solve. I researched. Sterling Trust Financial had a website. I created an account using Michael's email address and the information from the statements. The password reset was easy enough to figure out. He used the same handful of passwords for everything, a habit I'd always nagged him about. Within minutes, I was looking at the full account history. Years of it. The account had been opened 5 years ago, shortly after Emma started high school. The deposits started small and grew larger over time. And the transfers to L. Morrison were regular, consistent, like clockwork. But it was the memo lines that finally broke me. For the kids. Emma's dance lessons. Jake's birthday. Except Emma didn't take dance lessons. And these transfers were happening on dates that weren't Jake's birthday. There were other kids. His kids. Kids he was supporting. Kids I didn't know existed. Which meant there was another woman, another family, a whole life he'd built in parallel to ours. I sat there staring at the screen until the words stopped making sense, until they were just shapes and lines, until I felt so numb I couldn't feel anything at all. Then I closed the laptop and went upstairs and threw up in the bathroom, When I came back down, I cleaned up the evidence of my snooping. I made myself presentable. I picked up the kids from school and asked about their days and made dinner and went through all the motions of normal life, while inside I was screaming. Michael came home at his usual time, kissed me absently, and asked what was for dinner. I watched him interact with our kids, his kids, the legitimate ones, the ones who lived in his primary house with his primary wife, and wondered how he did it, how he compartmentalized, how he lived two lives without going insane. Or maybe he was insane. Maybe we all were, and I was the only one who didn't know it yet. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay beside him in our bed, listening to him breathe, and felt like I was sleeping next to a stranger. This man I'd known for more than 20 years, whose body I knew as well as my own, whose habits and quirks and preferences I could list without thinking. I didn't know him at all. Who was Morrison? How had they met? How long had it been going on? Did he love her? Did he tell her he loved her? Did he use the same words, the same gestures, the same promises he'd used with me? Did she know about us? Did those other children know they had half-siblings somewhere, living just a few towns over probably, going to different schools, living completely separate lives? The questions circled in my head until I thought I'd go mad from them. 3 days passed. 3 days of pretending everything was normal while I died a little more inside with each passing hour. 3 days of watching my husband lie to me, with every smile, every casual conversation, every mundane interaction. On Saturday morning, while Michael was outside mowing the lawn and the kids were still asleep, I looked up Morrison online. It wasn't hard to find her. People put everything online these days. Laura Morrison, 34, lived 20 minutes away. She had an Instagram account set to public. The photos told me everything I needed to know. A pretty brunette with a warm smile. 2 kids, a boy about 6 and a girl about 4. Photos of birthday parties and playground visits and ordinary life. Photos that looked exactly like the photos on my own social media, just with different faces. There were no photos of Michael. She was careful about that, or maybe he was. But in one photo, taken at what looked like a 4th of July barbecue, I could see the edge of someone's arm around her shoulders. A man's arm, wearing a watch I recognized. Michael's watch, the one I'd given him for our 15th anniversary. I closed the browser and sat very still, afraid that if I moved, I'd shatter into 1,000 pieces. When Michael came back inside, sweaty from yard work, I was waiting in the kitchen with the printed bank statements spread across the table. He froze in the doorway. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. Then he said, very quietly, "We should talk somewhere private." "The kids are asleep. Speak quietly." My voice sounded strange to me, too calm, too controlled, like it belonged to someone else. He sat down across from me, his eyes on the papers, not on my face. He couldn't look at me. "How long have you known?" he asked. Not an apology, not a denial, just that question. "Does it matter?" I asked. "I suppose not." "Who is she?" He was quiet for so long, I thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, "Her name is Laura. I met her at a conference 5 years ago." 5 years. The words tasted like ashes. "You've been lying to me for 5 years." "I never meant for it to happen." I laughed, and the sound was bitter enough to make him flinch. "No one ever does. But it happened anyway, didn't it? And you kept it happening. For 5 years. It's complicated." "Uncomplicate it for me. Explain how you've been living 2 lives, supporting 2 families, lying to everyone for 5 years. Make me understand." He rubbed his face, and I saw how tired he looked. How worn. Like he'd been carrying a weight for so long, he'd forgotten what it felt like to be free of it. "I don't expect you to understand. I'm not even sure I understand. It just happened. Laura and I connected. She understood things about me that she just understood." What didn't I understand, Michael? What was I missing? What could I have done differently so you wouldn't have needed to create an entire second family? It wasn't about you. It was never about you. Bullshit. The word came out sharp, violent. Don't you dare tell me this wasn't about me. You made a choice. Every single day for 5 years, you made a choice. You chose to lie. You chose her. You chose to split yourself in half and give her the pieces you didn't give me. I didn't want to hurt you. But you did it anyway. You took money that should have been ours, that should have been for our kids' future, and you gave it to her, to them. You created children with her while you were still married to me. Do those kids know about us? Does she? He shook his head. She knows I'm married. She's always known. The kids, they think I travel for work, that I'm away a lot. How convenient. And what do our kids think? When you're not here, when you're with them? That I'm working late. Which I am, technically. I have a consulting business on the side. That's where the money comes from. It's not money I'm taking from us. It's extra income. I stared at him, incredulous. You think that makes it better? You built a secret business to fund your secret family, and somehow that's supposed to make me feel less betrayed? I know how it sounds. Do you? Do you really? Because I don't think you do. I don't think you have any idea what you've done. My voice was rising, despite my intention to stay calm. I forced myself to breathe, to think, to not completely lose control. Tell me everything, I said. If you have even a shred of respect left for me, for our marriage, tell me the truth, all of it. So he did. He told me about meeting Laura at a financial conference in Chicago, how they'd talked for hours over drinks in the hotel bar, how she'd made him feel young again, interesting, like someone worth listening to, how one thing led to another, and they'd spent the night together. He'd thought it would be a one-time thing, a mistake he'd regret and then forget. But then she'd called him a month later to tell him she was pregnant. I panicked, he said. I didn't know what to do. She said she'd handle it, that I didn't have to be involved. But I couldn't just walk away. I couldn't abandon my own child. So you decided to abandon your wife instead. Your vows, your family. I never abandoned you. I've been here, haven't I? I've been a husband to you, a father to our kids. A husband? I felt hysteria bubbling up in my throat. Michael, you had a whole other family. You've been living a double life for 5 years. That's not being a husband. That's being a liar. I tried to balance both. I tried to be there for everyone. And how did that work out? You gave us the crumbs of yourself, the leftovers after you'd given her your best. Did you think I wouldn't notice? Did you think I wouldn't feel you pulling away? He didn't answer, which was answer enough. When the baby was born, a boy, I set up the account. I wanted to make sure he was taken care of. Then, 3 years ago, Laura got pregnant again. A girl this time. And I couldn't walk away from them. They needed me. We needed you, too. The words burst out of me, raw and painful. Your actual children, your actual family needed you. But you were too busy playing house with your other family to notice. That's not fair. Fair? You want to talk about fair? I've spent 19 years building a life with you. I put my career on hold to raise our children. I've been faithful and loyal and trusted you completely. And all this time, you've been lying to me. You've been sleeping with another woman, creating children with her, building a life with her. Where's the fairness in that? He had no answer. I looked at him, really looked at him, and tried to find the man I'd married, the man who'd stood across from me at our wedding and promised to love me, honor me, forsake all others. But that man was gone. Maybe he'd never existed at all. Maybe I just imagined him, created a fantasy of who I wanted him to be, and never saw who he really was. Do you love her? I asked quietly. The hesitation before he answered told me everything. I don't know. I care about her, about the kids. But you're my wife. You're the mother of my children. That means something. Not enough, apparently. The kitchen clock ticked in the silence. Upstairs, I heard one of the kids moving around. We'd run out of time for this conversation, at least for now. What are you going to do? Michael asked, his voice barely a whisper. I don't know yet. But Michael, you need to leave. Today. Pack a bag and get out. I need time to think, and I can't do that with you here. Where am I supposed to go? The audacity of the question made me want to scream. I don't know. Maybe you can stay with Laura. I'm sure she has room for you. Or get a hotel. I don't care. But you can't stay here, not tonight. The kids? I'll tell the kids you have a work trip. We'll maintain the lie a little longer, at least until I figure out what to do. But I need you gone. Now. He stood slowly, like an old man, and walked toward the door. Then he stopped and turned back. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. I never meant for any of this to happen. But it did happen, and sorry doesn't fix it. Sorry doesn't give me back the years you stole from me, the trust you destroyed, the life I thought we had. He nodded and left. I heard him moving around upstairs, packing. I sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by the evidence of his betrayal, and tried to figure out how to tell my children that their father wasn't who they thought he was, that none of us were who we thought we were. After he left, the house felt different, emptier, but also clearer somehow, like removing something toxic had allowed me to breathe again. I spent the rest of the weekend in a fog, going through the motions of normalcy, while my mind raced through possibilities and outcomes. I could kick him out permanently, file for divorce, take him for everything he had. I could expose him publicly, let everyone know what he'd done. I could confront Laura, tell her exactly what I thought of women who knowingly sleep with married men. Or I could do nothing. Pretend I'd never found out. Go back to the comfortable lie of our marriage and try to forget what I knew. But I couldn't. Once you've seen the truth, you can't unsee it. On Monday morning, I called a lawyer. The first thing she asked was whether I had evidence. I showed her the photos on my phone, and she nodded grimly. This is going to get ugly, she warned. But you have a strong case. Infidelity, hidden assets, misuse of marital funds. He's going to lose a lot in the divorce. Divorce? The word still felt unreal, like something that happened to other people, not to me. But it was real. My marriage was over. Maybe it had been over for years, and I just hadn't known it. The lawyer explained my options, the process, what to expect. I listened and nodded and took notes, but everything felt distant, like it was happening to someone else. When I left her office, I sat in my car for a long time before I could drive home. I thought about Michael, probably at work right now, going through his day like everything was normal. Did he think I'd forgive him? Did he think we could somehow work through this? Or had he already accepted that his double life was over? That the careful balance he'd maintained for 5 years had finally collapsed? That night, Emma asked where her father was. I told her he had a last-minute business trip, and she accepted it without question. Why wouldn't she? We'd never given her a reason to doubt us before. But Jake looked at me, with eyes too old for his 16 years, and said, "Is everything okay, Mom?" "Everything's fine," I lied. "Why?" "You seem different, sad." I pulled him into a hug. This boy who was already almost a man, who could read me better than I'd realized. "I'm just tired," I said. "Nothing for you to worry about." But he did worry. I could see it in his face. And I hated Michael for that, for making our children worry, for the chaos he was about to bring into their lives. Over the next few days, I started making plans. I contacted my old boss about returning to work. I hadn't worked since Emma was born, had given up my career to be a stay-at-home mom, because that's what Michael and I had agreed was best for our family. Now I saw that decision differently. I'd made myself financially dependent on him, vulnerable. But I could fix that. I would fix that. I also drove past Laura's house. I'm not proud of it, but I needed to see with my own eyes where my husband had been spending his time, his money, his life. It was a small house, modest, in a neighborhood not unlike ours. There was a swing set in the backyard, toys scattered on the lawn, a minivan in the driveway, just like mine. As I watched, the front door opened, and Laura came out with the little girl on her hip. She was laughing at something, settling the child into a car seat, completely unaware that she was being watched by the other woman in her boyfriend's life. Did she know he was married? Michael had said she did. But did she know about Emma and Jake? Did she know that the money supporting her children was supposed to be supporting mine? I wanted to hate her. It would have been easier if I could just blame her, the other woman, the homewrecker. But watching her with her daughter, seeing the tenderness in her movements, I realized she was just another person caught in Michael's web of lies. Maybe she thought he was going to leave me. Maybe he'd promised her that, year after year, and she'd believed him. Maybe she was as much a victim as I was. Or maybe she knew exactly what she was doing and didn't care. Either way, she had something that belonged to me. Not Michael. I didn't want him anymore. But the truth, the full truth. She deserved to know it as much as I did. So I got out of my car and walked up to her door before I could talk myself out of it. She answered on the second knock, the little girl still on her hip. Up close, she was prettier than her photos, with kind eyes and a genuine smile that faltered when she saw the expression on my face. "Can I help you?" she asked. "My name is Catherine Thompson," I said. "I'm Michael's wife." I watched the color drain from her face. The smile disappeared. She pulled her daughter closer, protective, and I understood in that moment that she'd never expected to meet me. Michael had kept us carefully separated, two worlds that were never supposed to collide. "I think we need to talk," I said. She hesitated, then nodded. "Let me put my daughter down for her nap. Wait here." She disappeared inside, and I stood on the porch, wondering if she'd come back, or if she'd call the police or Michael, or just hide until I left. But she came back. She led me to the kitchen, offered me coffee I declined, and sat across from me at her table the same way I'd sat across from Michael just days before. "How long have you known?" she asked, echoing Michael's question. "A week." "How long have you known about me?" "The whole time. He told me he was married when we met. He said you and he were staying together for the kids, but that the marriage was over in every way that mattered." I laughed, and it sounded as bitter coming from me as it had from Michael. "Is that what he told you? The marriage was fine, Laura. At least I thought it was. We had problems, sure, every marriage does. But I loved him, I trusted him. I thought we were building a life together. He said you didn't understand him, that you'd grown apart. We grew apart because he was building another life 20 minutes away. God, do you not see how insane this is? He's been lying to both of us for years." She wrapped her arms around herself, defensive. "I'm not the villain here. I didn't seduce a married man. He came to me. He pursued me. He told me he was going to leave you. But he never did he? Year after year, he stayed with me, slept in my bed, raised our children, and told me he loved me. And year after year, he came here and did the same with you. He's been living two lives, Laura. Two complete lives. Did you ever wonder how he managed that?" Of course I wondered. But he had a good explanation for everything. The late hours, the canceled plans, the times he couldn't be reached. He was busy, he was working. He was taking care of things. He was taking care of me, of our family, while telling you we were over and telling me everything was fine. She started crying, quiet tears that tracked down her cheeks. I loved him. I love him. He's the father of my children. He's the father of my children too, and he's lied to all of us. We sat in silence, two women who should have been enemies, but were really just two victims of the same man's selfishness. "What are you going to do?" Laura asked finally. "I'm divorcing him. I'm taking him for everything I can legally take, and I'm moving on with my life." "He won't have anything left if you do that. How am I supposed to support my kids?" The audacity of the question stunned me. "That's not my problem. That's his problem. He's the one who decided to have children with two different women while lying to both of us. Let him figure out how to support everyone." "But my kids are innocent in this. They didn't ask to be born. They didn't ask for any of this. Neither did mine. Neither did I. But here we all are. dealing with the consequences of Michael's choices. So you're just going to destroy his life? Destroy my life? My children's lives? Out of revenge? I stood up, my hands shaking with rage. Revenge? This isn't revenge. This is consequence. This is Michael finally having to face what he's done. He doesn't get to have both lives anymore. He doesn't get to keep lying, keep pretending, keep hurting people without any repercussions. I thought you'd understand. Woman to woman, mother to mother. I do understand. I understand that you helped him lie to me for 5 years. I understand that you knew he was married and didn't care. I understand that my children are going to be devastated when they find out their father isn't who they thought he was. So no, Laura, I don't have any sympathy left for you or for him. I used it all up. I left her sitting at her kitchen table and walked back to my car. I was shaking so hard I could barely drive, but I made it home, pulled into the garage, and sat there until the trembling stopped. I'd confronted her. I'd told her the truth, and it changed nothing. Michael had still lied. He'd still betrayed us both. He'd still created this nightmare that we all had to live through now. That night, I told the kids. I'd put it off as long as I could, hoping for the right words, the right moment, the right way to shatter their world. But there was no right way. There was only the truth, ugly and painful and unavoidable. Emma cried. Jake got angry, punched a hole in his bedroom wall that I'd have to figure out how to fix later. They asked questions I couldn't answer, or answered with lies that felt like betrayals of their own. Does Dad love us? Emma asked through her tears. Of course he does. This isn't about you. It's about choices he made that have nothing to do with how he feels about you. But I wasn't sure I believed that. If he loved them, really loved them, would he have risked losing them for this? I hate him, Jake said, and I didn't correct him. I couldn't, because in that moment, I hated Michael too. The divorce took 8 months. 8 months of lawyers and mediations and arguments over money and custody and who got the house. 8 months of Michael trying to convince me to reconsider, to give him another chance, to think about the kids. As if I'd thought about anything else. In the end, I got the house. I got primary custody. I got a settlement that would keep me and the kids comfortable, though not as comfortable as we would have been if he hadn't been secretly supporting another family for 5 years. Michael got visitation rights and a smaller apartment, and the reality that his children now looked at him differently, like they didn't quite trust him anymore. Laura got nothing from me, though Michael was still court-ordered to support his children with her. How he managed that on what was left of his income, I didn't know and didn't care. The kids adjusted slowly. Emma started therapy, working through her feelings about the divorce. Jake threw himself into school and sports, determined to get a scholarship so he wouldn't have to depend on his father for college money. And I started rebuilding my life. I went back to work, taking a position at a marketing firm that paid less than I would have made if I'd never left the workforce, but was flexible with hours and didn't require travel. I needed to be there for my kids, especially now. I joined a divorce support group, sat in circles with other women whose marriages had ended in betrayal, and realized I wasn't alone. Everyone had their own version of my story. Different details, same pain. I learned to be okay with being alone. Not lonely, but alone. To make decisions without consulting anyone. To eat dinner when I wanted to, watch whatever I wanted on TV, go to bed without having to accommodate someone else's schedule. I learned that my worth wasn't tied to being someone's wife, that I was more than half of a couple, that I could be whole all by myself. It took time. More time than I expected. There were days I missed him, or at least missed the idea of him, the life we'd had before I knew the truth. There were days I was so angry I couldn't see straight, days I wanted to call him and scream until my throat was raw. But slowly, those days became less frequent. Slowly, I started to remember who I was before I was Michael's wife, before I was anyone's mother. I started to remember the girl who'd had dreams of her own, ambitions that didn't involve keeping house and raising children. And I started to build a new life, one where I made the rules, where I decided what mattered and what didn't, where I was accountable only to myself and my children. A year after the divorce was finalized, Emma got accepted to her first-choice college. She called me from school, screaming with excitement, and I cried happy tears for the first time in what felt like forever. "Did you tell your father?" I asked. "Not yet. I wanted to tell you first. You're the one who helped me with my applications. You're the one who believed I could do it." And in that moment, I realized that maybe something good had come from all of this after all. My children had learned that marriages don't always last, that people disappoint you, that life doesn't always go according to plan. But they'd also learned resilience. They'd learned that you can survive betrayal and come out stronger. They'd learned that women don't need men to save them, that mothers can be both parents when they need to be, that love doesn't excuse lies. They'd learned, as I had, that sometimes the greatest act of strength is walking away from something that's hurting you, even when it's hard, even when it means starting over, even when you're terrified of what comes next. 2 years after finding that bank statement, I was finally okay. Not happy in the way I'd been before, in that naive, trusting way, but okay in a deeper, stronger way. Okay in the way you are when you've been broken and put yourself back together, when you've survived something you didn't think you could survive. I saw Michael occasionally at school events, at graduations and concerts and parent-teacher conferences that required both of us. It was awkward at first, painful, but eventually it became just another part of my new normal. He looked older now, more tired. The weight of maintaining his double life for so many years had taken its toll, and now that it was all out in the open, now that he couldn't hide behind lies anymore, it showed. I didn't feel sorry for him, but I didn't hate him anymore either. Hate required too much energy, too much emotional investment. He'd lost the power to hurt me that way. Emma left for college in the fall. Jake had 1 more year of high school, and I had myself, finally, completely. The house felt different without Emma, quieter, but it was mine now, in a way it had never been when Michael lived here. I painted the walls, colors I liked. I rearranged furniture. I turned Michael's old office into a reading room with a comfortable chair and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. I made it home in the way I wanted it to be home, not the way someone else expected it to be. And late at night, when the house was quiet and I was alone with my thoughts, I sometimes wondered what my life would have been like if I'd never found that envelope, if I'd never opened his briefcase, if I'd remained blissfully ignorant while he continued to live 2 lives. Would that have been better? Would ignorance have been easier than this painful knowledge? The answer was always no, because living in a lie, even a comfortable one, isn't really living. It's existing in a shadow of truth, building your life on a foundation that could crumble at any moment. I'd rather live in the harsh light of reality than in the soft glow of illusion. I'd rather know who I really was, strong, resilient, capable, than believe I was someone who needed a man's lies to stay happy. 3 years after the divorce, I ran into Laura at the grocery store. We'd successfully avoided each other for years, living in parallel orbits that occasionally intersected but never collided. But there she was, in the produce section, with her daughter, 7 now, with pigtails and a gap-toothed smile. The boy wasn't with her. We saw each other at the same moment. For a second, I thought about turning around, avoiding the confrontation. But I was done running from uncomfortable situations, done pretending painful things didn't exist. "Catherine," she said, her voice careful. "Laura." We stood there awkwardly, 2 women connected by the worst parts of our lives, by a man who'd hurt us both. "How are you?" she asked, and I could tell she actually wanted to know. "I'm good, really good actually. You?" "Getting by. It's been hard." She glanced at her daughter, lowered her voice. "Michael lost his job 6 months ago. The child support is irregular now. I had to go back to work full-time." Part of me wanted to feel vindicated, to be glad he was struggling after what he'd done, but mostly I just felt tired. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. "That must be difficult." Did you know that he got fired? I shook my head. He doesn't tell me much anymore. Just shows up for his weekends with the kids and leaves. We don't talk. He says you ruined his life, that if you hadn't been so vindictive in the divorce, he'd still have his career. The accusation stung, even secondhand. I divorced him because he lied to me for years, because he built a secret life and destroyed my trust. What happened to his career after that was his responsibility, not mine. I know you're right, but it's easier to blame you than to blame himself. She paused, then added quietly, I'm sorry. For my part in all of it. I convinced myself I wasn't doing anything wrong because he said your marriage was over, but I knew, deep down, that I was helping him lie. I just didn't want to see it. It was the apology I'd needed 3 years ago, but had given up hoping for. Thank you for saying that. Did you ever forgive him, Michael? I thought about it. No, I don't think I have. I've let go of the anger, moved past the hurt. But forgiveness? That requires him to actually acknowledge what he did wrong, to show real remorse. And he's never done that. He's just blamed me and circumstances and everything except himself. So you just live with it? The lack of closure? I make my own closure. I don't need his permission or his apology to move forward. I just needed to decide that I was done, letting what he did define me. Her daughter tugged on her hand, impatient to keep shopping. Laura smiled down at her, then looked back at me. I hope you find happiness, Catherine. Real happiness. You deserve it. So do you, I said, and I meant it. We both do, despite everything. I watched them walk away, this woman who'd helped destroy my marriage, and I didn't feel hatred anymore. Just a weary sadness for all the time we'd all wasted, all the pain that could have been avoided if Michael had just been honest. But he hadn't been, and we'd all paid the price. That night, I told Jake about running into Laura. He was 17 now, almost a man, preparing for college applications and worrying about the future in the way seniors do. Do you think you'll ever date again, Mom? He asked suddenly. The question surprised me. Maybe, someday. Why? Because you deserve to be happy, and Dad doesn't get to be the reason you're alone forever. I pulled him into a hug, this boy who'd grown so much in the past 3 years, who'd watched his mother fall apart and put herself back together and learned from it. I'm not alone. I have you and Emma. I have my work, my friends, my life. If someone comes along who adds to that, great. But I don't need someone to complete me. I'm already complete. He smiled. That's a pretty good answer. I've had a lot of time to think about it. 4 years after the divorce, Emma graduated college. Michael came to the ceremony, brought Laura and their kids. It was awkward, surreal, watching my ex-husband and his other family sitting 3 rows behind me, celebrating my daughter's achievement. But Emma had invited them. She'd decided, with the help of her therapist, that she wanted to know her half-siblings, that it wasn't their fault how they'd come into the world, and punishing them for Michael's mistakes wasn't fair. I didn't agree, but I respected her choice. She was an adult now, making her own decisions about her relationships and her life. At the reception afterward, Michael approached me. He looked older than his years, grayer, with lines around his eyes that hadn't been there when we were married. She looks happy, he said, nodding toward Emma, who was laughing with friends. She is. She's done well. You did a good job with them, both of them. I know I wasn't around as much as I should have been, especially these last few years. But they turned out great. That's because of you. It was the closest he'd ever come to acknowledging his failures as a father, as a husband, as a man. They turned out great because they're resilient, because they learned to adapt to difficult circumstances, because they chose to keep going even when life didn't turn out the way they expected. He understood the implication. I know you'll never forgive me. I don't expect you to. But I want you to know that I do regret how things happened. the lies, the betrayal. You didn't deserve that. No, I didn't. But I survived it. And I'm better for it now, even though that seems impossible to say. Better? Stronger. More honest with myself. More aware of what I will and won't accept. You taught me that, in the worst possible way. You taught me that I'm capable of more than I ever thought I was. He nodded slowly. I'm glad something good came from it, at least. Something good came from it for all of us. Your other children exist. That's something. Emma and Jake learned important lessons about integrity and consequences. I learned who I really am when everything falls apart. Even you learned something, I hope. What did I learn? That you can't have everything. That choices have consequences. That lies eventually catch up with you, no matter how careful you think you're being. He looked away, unable to meet my eyes. I should go. Laura's waiting. Michael? I called as he started to walk away. He turned back. I hope you're being honest with her now. Whatever else happens, I hope you learned that lesson at least. I am, I promise. I watched him rejoin his other family, watched them all together, and felt nothing but a vague relief that it wasn't me anymore. That I wasn't the one trying to hold together a relationship built on lies. That night, I went home to my quiet house and sat on my back porch with a glass of wine. The stars were bright, the air was warm, and I felt at peace in a way I'd never felt during my marriage. I thought about the woman I'd been 4 years ago, the one who'd opened that envelope and felt her world collapse, the one who'd believed her marriage was solid, her life was predictable, her future was secure. That woman was gone. She'd died the moment she read that bank statement, the moment she understood that everything she believed was a lie. But in her place was someone stronger, someone who didn't need anyone else's validation to know her worth, someone who'd survived betrayal and rebuilt her life from the ground up, someone who'd learned that the only person you can really trust is yourself. I raised my glass to the stars, to the journey I'd been on, to the woman I'd become. Here's to truth, I said to the empty air. However painful it is, here's to surviving. Here's to starting over. Here's to me. And I drank to that, to the hard-won peace I'd found, to the life I'd built from the ashes of the one that burned down. 5 years after finding that envelope, I met someone. His name was David, and he was divorced too, with kids of his own. We met at a work conference of all places, and bonded over shared stories of betrayal and recovery. He asked me out, and I said yes, surprising myself. We took it slow. I wasn't the trusting woman I'd once been. I asked questions, checked for inconsistencies, looked for red flags. I was cautious in a way I'd never been before. But he was patient. He understood. He'd been through his own version of what I'd experienced, and he knew that trust had to be earned, not assumed. We dated for 2 years before he proposed. And even then, I hesitated. The idea of marriage, of legally binding myself to another person, of putting my faith in someone else's promises, it terrified me. I don't know if I can do this again, I told him honestly. What if you're lying? What if there's something you're not telling me? What if I'm making the same mistake twice? Then we deal with it, he said simply. Together. But Catherine, I'm not Michael. I'm not hiding anything. I'm not living a double life. I'm just a man who loves you and wants to spend his life with you. That's all I can promise. That I'll be honest, even when it's hard. That I'll choose you every day. That I'll never make you wonder if I'm really where I say I am. How do I know you mean that? You don't, not for certain, but you know me. You've spent 2 years getting to know me. You've met my kids, my family, my friends. You've seen my phone, my accounts, my entire life. I've been transparent because I know what it's like to be lied to, and I never want to do that to someone else. I looked at this man who'd somehow found his way into my carefully guarded heart, who'd been patient with my fears and my walls, who'd never once made me feel crazy for being suspicious or cautious. Okay, I said, let's do this. But David, if you ever lie to me, If you ever betray my trust, I won't give you a second chance. I'll walk away and never look back. I've done it before, and I'll do it again. So, I wouldn't expect anything less, and I'll never give you a reason to. We got married on a Saturday in October, with our kids standing beside us, blending our two broken families into something new, something honest. It wasn't perfect. Marriage never is. But it was real. It was built on truth and transparency, and the understanding that we'd both been hurt before and refused to hurt each other the same way. Emma and Jake both gave speeches at the reception. They talked about watching me rebuild my life, about learning from my strength, about being proud of the woman I'd become. My mom taught me that you don't need someone else to be whole, Emma said, that you can survive anything if you're honest with yourself about what you will and won't accept. That love doesn't mean accepting lies. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from something that's breaking you. Jake added, she taught me what real strength looks like. Not the kind that pretends everything is fine when it's not, but the kind that faces hard truths and keeps going anyway. The kind that rebuilds when everything falls apart. I cried listening to them. These two incredible humans who'd watched their mother's world collapse and had seen her build something better from the ruins. That night, as David and I left the reception, I caught sight of Michael in the parking lot. He was alone, watching from a distance. Laura hadn't come to the wedding, and I didn't blame her. It would have been too awkward for everyone. For a moment, our eyes met, and I saw something in his face that looked like regret, or maybe just recognition that I'd moved on, built a new life, found happiness despite everything he'd done. I didn't wave, didn't acknowledge him. I just turned to David, took his hand, and walked toward our car, toward our future, toward the life I'd chosen this time with full awareness and open eyes. And I didn't look back. Because the woman I'd been when I opened that envelope no longer existed. She'd been replaced by someone stronger, someone wiser, someone who knew her own worth and wouldn't settle for anything less than honesty. Michael had taken so much from me, my trust, my innocence, my belief in the permanence of marriage, but he'd also given me something, though not intentionally. He'd given me myself, the real me, not the version I'd created to be a good wife, a good mother, a good woman, but the authentic me, with all my strength and scars and hard-won wisdom. And that version of me was never going back. Years later, when people ask me if I regret finding out the truth, if I wish I'd remained ignorant, if I think my life would have been better if I'd never opened that envelope, I always give them the same answer. No. Because living in the truth, however painful, is always better than living in a lie. Because I'd rather be alone and authentic than partnered and pretending. Because my children learned what integrity looks like by watching me refuse to accept betrayal. Because I learned who I really was when everything else was stripped away. But wasn't it hard? They ask. Wasn't it terrible, going through all of that? It was the hardest thing I've ever done. But it was also the most important. Because I learned that I could survive the worst thing I could imagine. And if I could survive that, I could survive anything. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday, and it changed everything. But not in the way Michael intended when he hid that account from me, when he built that secret life, when he lied for 5 years straight. It changed everything because it forced me to see the truth, to stop living in comfortable denial, to face reality, however painful, and to decide who I wanted to be in the aftermath. And I chose to be someone who wouldn't accept lies. Someone who valued honesty over comfort. Someone who would rather start over from scratch than continue building on a foundation of deception. Michael thought he was protecting me by hiding his other life. He thought he could have it all, do families, 2 lives, 2 versions of himself. But all he really did was prove that I was stronger than he ever was. That I could face the truth he was too cowardly to tell. That I could rebuild what he destroyed and make it better than it was before. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday, and on that Tuesday, without knowing it, I started becoming the woman I was always meant to be. Strong, honest, whole, and completely, authentically mine.